There is a creature alive right now, floating quietly in a river, somewhere on this planet, that has barely changed in 200 million years. Tonight, we find out how it managed to survive everything else that didn't. Welcome to tonight's journey back through time, to a story that started long before the first flower ever bloomed, long before mammals ruled anything at all, long before most of the animals we know today had even taken shape. Somewhere in a warm, muddy river roughly 200 million years ago, something was already floating just beneath the surface, eyes barely breaking the waterline, waiting with a patience that has barely changed since. That creature was an early ancestor of the crocodile, and remarkably, the basic design it settled on back then still works today, almost unchanged, while dinosaurs rose and vanished entirely, while mountains lifted and eroded, while entire oceans opened and closed across the surface of the planet. Tonight we are going to slowly trace that story, from the very first crocodile-like reptiles crawling out of ancient swamps, through their strange, sometimes surprising branches, all the way to the powerful, armored survivors still floating quietly in rivers and swamps around the world today. 200 million years is a genuinely difficult span of time to picture. Entire mountain ranges have risen and worn back down to nothing within that stretch. And yet, through all of it, this one particular family of reptiles simply kept doing, more or less, exactly what it had always done. Picture a warm, humid floodplain in the very early days of the dinosaur age, ferns and primitive conifers crowding the muddy banks, the air thick with moisture and the calls of creatures long since gone extinct. Somewhere in that ancient water, a low, long shape drifts silently forward, patient, watchful, already carrying the blueprint for one of the most successful survival stories nature has ever produced. We will begin with where crocodiles actually came from, since the answer turns out to be considerably stranger than most people expect, involving upright runners, ocean-dwelling giants, and a family tree far stranger than the quiet river dwellers we know today would ever suggest. Crocodiles did not simply appear already looking the way they do now. Their earliest ancestors belonged to a much larger, far stranger group of reptiles called archosaurs, a broad family that also eventually gave rise to dinosaurs, and later, to birds. This means crocodiles are, in a real evolutionary sense, distant cousins of eagles and sparrows, sharing a common ancestor buried deep in the reptilian family tree long before either lineage looked anything like their descendants do today. Early archosaurs during the Triassic period took on an enormous variety of body shapes, some walking upright on two legs, some heavily armored, some built more like slender, active hunters than anything resembling a modern crocodile at all. Out of this diverse, experimental group, one particular branch gradually began favoring a low, semi-aquatic lifestyle, spending increasing amounts of time near water, developing the long snout and powerful jaw muscles that would eventually define the entire crocodilian line. Fossil evidence from this period shows some genuinely bizarre early relatives, creatures with long, thin legs built for running rather than swimming, some even fully terrestrial predators that behaved nothing like the ambush hunters we associate with crocodiles today. It took millions of years of trial, adaptation, and extinction before the specific body plan we now recognize finally settled into place. Some of these early archosaurs were even covered in bony armor plating running down their backs, a feature that would later reappear in modern crocodilians, though the two versions evolved somewhat independently rather than being passed down in one continuous, unbroken line. One of the strangest chapters in this early story involves a group of ancient crocodile relatives that were, surprisingly, built almost entirely for life on land rather than water. Some of these early forms had long, slender legs positioned more directly beneath their bodies, rather than sprawled out to the sides the way modern crocodiles walk, allowing them to run with real speed across dry ground in pursuit of prey. A few species even show evidence of an upright, more active hunting style, closer in some ways to how a modern wolf or big cat might move than anything we would expect from a crocodile today. Paleontologists studying these fossils have found teeth adapted for slicing rather than the simple gripping and crushing bite modern crocodiles rely on, further evidence that this branch of the family was hunting very differently from their eventual, water-loving relatives. These land-based crocodile relatives eventually died out, unable to compete as dinosaurs rose to dominate most large terrestrial predator roles across the planet. It was the water-adapted branch, quietly floating in rivers and swamps largely ignored by the towering dinosaurs stomping around on land, that would go on to survive, essentially by avoiding direct competition entirely rather than trying to outcompete it. This particular lesson, survival through avoidance rather than confrontation, would end up repeating itself again and again throughout crocodilian history, a quiet, patient strategy that has proven remarkably durable across an enormous stretch of geological time. As the dinosaur age truly took hold, crocodilian ancestors settled increasingly into the aquatic ambush strategy that still defines them today, and this decision turned out to be extraordinarily wise, even if nothing living at the time could have known it. While dinosaurs diversified explosively across nearly every terrestrial environment on the planet, crocodile ancestors quietly occupied a much narrower, less contested niche, wading in rivers, lakes, and coastal shallows for prey to come to them, rather than chasing it down across open ground. This strategy required relatively little in the way of new innovation once the basic body plan settled into place. A low, streamlined body. Eyes and nostrils positioned high on the skull, allowing the animal to remain almost entirely submerged while still watching and breathing. A powerful, muscular tail providing propulsion through water far more efficiently than legs ever could. Once these pieces fell into place, there was remarkably little pressure to change them further. Some of the largest crocodilian ancestors from this period grew to sizes that would be considered enormous even by today's standards, some species stretching well beyond the length of the biggest modern crocodiles, sharing rivers and coastlines alongside dinosaurs that dwarfed nearly everything else alive at the time. These massive ancient crocodilians likely fed on whatever wandered too close to the water's edge, including young or smaller dinosaurs, occupying a genuinely fearsome position within their particular ecosystem, despite living in the shadow of some of the largest land animals to ever exist. Let us pause here for a moment, drifting away from the deeper history and simply resting in a calmer scene. A wide, slow-moving river cutting through dense, ancient forest, mist rising gently off the warm water in the cool morning air. Somewhere near the muddy bank, a low shape rests motionless, barely visible above the waterline, patient in a way that feels almost timeless. Nothing here rushes toward anything. The whole scene moves at the same unhurried pace crocodilian ancestors themselves seem to have settled into, once they found a strategy that worked well enough to barely need adjusting across tens of millions of years. Somewhere overhead, an early bird-like creature calls out once, briefly, before falling silent again, the whole ancient scene settling back into that same patient, watchful stillness that has defined this particular family for longer than almost anything else alive today. Far off across the floodplain, the shapes of much larger creatures moved slowly through the haze, dinosaurs going about their own separate business entirely, paying no attention at all to the quiet, low shape resting motionless in the water nearby. We will continue shortly, moving next into one of the most dramatic moments in this entire story, the mass extinction event that ended the age of dinosaurs, and somehow left the crocodiles' ancestors relatively untouched. Roughly 66 million years ago, a massive asteroid struck the Earth, triggering a catastrophic chain of events that wiped out the non-avian dinosaurs entirely, along with an enormous number of other species across the planet. This event, one of the most significant mass extinctions in the planet's entire history, reshaped which animal groups would go on to dominate the world that followed. Crocodilians, remarkably, survived this catastrophe largely intact, one of the very few groups of large reptiles to make it through relatively unscathed. Scientists studying this survival point to several likely reasons. Their aquatic, ambush-based lifestyle required far less daily energy than the active hunting styles many dinosaurs relied on. Their diet was flexible enough to include almost anything available, insects, fish, carrion, rather than depending on any single, specific food source that might have disappeared during the crisis. Perhaps most importantly, crocodilians were already built to endure long stretches without much available food, a trait that would have proven enormously valuable during the chaotic years immediately following the impact, when food sources across the planet became scarce and unpredictable for an extended period afterward. Some researchers studying this extinction event point out that crocodilians' semi-aquatic lifestyle may have offered additional protection too, water providing at least some buffer against the immediate temperature swings and airborne debris that devastated so many purely terrestrial species in the aftermath of the impact. This survival through one of the most severe extinction events in Earth's history offers one of the clearest examples anywhere in the natural world of how being merely good enough, rather than spectacularly specialized, can sometimes offer the greatest evolutionary advantage of all. Dinosaurs, for all their remarkable diversity and dominance, had largely built themselves around ecological roles that simply could not survive the sudden, dramatic changes the asteroid impact triggered. Crocodilians, by contrast, had already settled into a lifestyle built around patience, flexibility, and low energy requirements, traits that happen to translate perfectly into surviving a period of extreme environmental instability. It was not foresight or planning of any kind. It was simply that the traits already in place turned out to match exactly what survival required once catastrophe actually struck. In the aftermath of the extinction, with so many large predators suddenly gone, crocodilians found themselves with considerably more room to expand into open ecological space, sometimes growing to remarkable sizes as they filled niches left vacant by species that had not managed to survive the disaster at all. This period of expansion offers a striking example of how extinction events, devastating as they are, can occasionally open unexpected doors for the survivors left behind, rewarding traits that had nothing to do with strength or dominance, and everything to do with quiet, patient adaptability. In the tens of millions of years following the extinction of the dinosaurs, crocodilians diversified considerably, filling an impressive range of ecological roles across a rapidly changing world. Some species grew to genuinely enormous sizes, rivaling or even exceeding the largest crocodilians alive today, while others remained comparatively small, adapted to narrower, more specific hunting niches within their particular environments. Fossil evidence from this period reveals crocodilian relatives living in an enormous range of habitats, some fully marine, spending their entire lives in open ocean rather than rivers or swamps, complete with paddle-like limbs and a tail fin more closely resembling a fish or dolphin than a modern crocodile. Others remained firmly freshwater specialists, while still others pushed back once more toward a partially terrestrial lifestyle, echoing, in a strange way, some of those earlier, land-based ancestors from much further back in the family's history. This remarkable diversity gradually narrowed over subsequent millions of years, as climate shifts and changing sea levels reshaped available habitat again and again, eventually leaving behind the smaller, more focused group of crocodilian species that persist across the world today. Studying these extinct marine and terrestrial branches helps researchers understand just how flexible the underlying crocodilian body plan actually was, capable of stretching toward ocean-dwelling giants or compact land hunters whenever circumstances favored it, even though the modern lineage eventually settled back into the familiar freshwater ambush strategy that had proven so durable from the very beginning. Modern crocodilians, the group we recognize today, split gradually into three main branches: true crocodiles, alligators and caimans, and the fish-eating gharial, each shaped by its own particular evolutionary path while still sharing that same fundamental body plan established so long ago. These three groups diverged from a shared ancestor tens of millions of years back, gradually adapting to slightly different prey, habitats, and hunting strategies as they spread across different parts of the world. True crocodiles generally developed a more V-shaped snout and a noticeably more aggressive temperament compared to their alligator relatives, along with specialized salt glands allowing several species to tolerate saltwater environments far more comfortably, a trait that eventually allowed certain crocodile species to cross considerable stretches of open ocean and colonize remote islands entirely inaccessible to their freshwater-bound alligator cousins. Alligators and caimans, by contrast, generally favor a broader, U-shaped snout suited to a slightly different diet, and tend toward a somewhat calmer temperament overall, though this varies considerably between individual species. The gharial took its own especially specialized path entirely, developing an extremely narrow, elongated snout built almost exclusively for catching fish with lightning speed through water. These three branches, despite their differences, still share the same fundamental blueprint established all those millions of years ago, a testament to just how effective that original design turned out to be, adaptable enough to fine-tune into several distinct specialists without ever needing to abandon the core strategy that made it successful in the first place. Stepping back across everything covered so far, a fairly remarkable picture starts to take shape. A body plan that first began settling into place roughly 200 million years ago, refined gradually across an almost unimaginable stretch of time, surviving not through constant reinvention, but through a rare combination of patience, flexibility, and remarkably low energy requirements that happen to match, almost perfectly, whatever challenges each successive era of Earth's history threw its way. From strange, land-running ancestors, to enormous river giants sharing space with dinosaurs, through one of the most severe extinction events the planet has ever experienced, and finally branching into the three distinct modern groups still found in rivers, swamps, and coastlines around the world today, crocodilians represent something genuinely rare in the story of life on Earth, a design good enough, and adaptable enough, to essentially outlast almost everything else around it. There is still much more of this story left to explore, the specific modern species scattered across the globe today, their remarkable hunting techniques, family life, and the ongoing challenges they face in a world reshaped considerably by human presence, a world that looks almost nothing like the one their ancestors first emerged into 200 million years ago, and yet still, somehow, they remain, floating quietly in rivers much like this one, patient as ever. Today, roughly 26 recognized crocodilian species survive across the world, scattered from the warm rivers of Africa and Asia to the swamps of the southeastern United States, from the muddy waterways of South America to the coastlines and estuaries of Australia. The saltwater crocodile, found across parts of Australia, Southeast Asia, and the eastern coast of India, holds the title of largest living reptile on the planet, with confirmed individuals stretching past 20 feet in length. This species owes much of its range to those specialized salt glands mentioned earlier, allowing it to comfortably tolerate ocean water for extended periods, occasionally undertaking journeys of hundreds of miles across open sea, drifting on currents rather than actively swimming the entire distance, conserving energy the way this whole family has always excelled at doing. At the opposite end of the size spectrum sits the dwarf crocodile of West and Central Africa, rarely growing beyond 5 or 6 feet in length, adapted instead to dense, shaded forest streams rather than open rivers or coastline. Its smaller size and secretive habits have made it considerably harder for researchers to study thoroughly, and much about its natural behavior in the wild remains only partially understood even today. Between these two extremes sits an enormous range of mid-sized species, each fine-tuned to its own particular stretch of river, swamp, or coastline, proof that the same basic crocodilian blueprint has proven flexible enough to fit an extraordinary variety of habitats across the modern world, much as it did across the tens of millions of years explored earlier in this story. The American alligator, found across the southeastern United States, offers one of the clearer conservation success stories within this entire family. Hunted heavily throughout the earlier 20th century for its skin, the species declined sharply enough to warrant serious concern, before targeted protection efforts, including hunting restrictions and habitat conservation, allowed populations to rebound substantially over subsequent decades. Its close relative, the Chinese alligator, tells a considerably more troubling story. Native to the lower reaches of the Yangtze River, this species has been pushed to the edge of extinction in the wild, primarily through habitat loss as agricultural development consumed much of its historical range. Conservation programs now rely heavily on captive breeding, with hopes of eventually reintroducing healthier populations back into carefully protected wild habitat. Meanwhile, across Central and South America, several caiman species continue thriving across an enormous range of wetland habitats, from dense Amazonian rainforest waterways to the open, seasonally flooded grasslands of the Pantanal, one of the largest and most biodiverse wetland systems found anywhere on the planet. The black caiman, the largest of these South American species, can rival many true crocodiles in overall size, occupying a top predator role within its particular ecosystem, hunting fish, capybara, and occasionally much larger prey along the slow-moving rivers and flooded forests it calls home. Crocodilian hunting technique remains, at its core, remarkably close to the strategy their ancestors settled on tens of millions of years ago, patient ambush rather than active pursuit. Most species spend the vast majority of their time resting motionless, either fully submerged with only eyes and nostrils breaking the surface, or basking along riverbanks to regulate their body temperature, conserving energy for the brief, explosive burst required once prey finally comes within range. This ambush strategy relies heavily on remarkable patience combined with an explosive final strike. A crocodile can remain almost perfectly still for hours, sometimes considerably longer, waiting for exactly the right moment before launching forward with startling speed, closing the distance to prey in a fraction of a second, followed by a bite force among the strongest measured in the entire animal kingdom. Once prey is caught, most crocodilians rely on a distinctive feeding technique called the death roll, spinning rapidly in the water to tear off manageable pieces from larger prey, since their jaw structure, while extraordinarily powerful for biting down, is poorly suited to the kind of tearing or chewing motion many other predators rely on to break food apart. Interestingly, while a crocodile's bite force ranks among the strongest ever measured in any living animal, the muscles responsible for opening the jaw are comparatively weak enough that a person can hold a crocodile's mouth shut using little more than their bare hands, provided they are experienced enough, and brave enough, to attempt it in the first place. Not every crocodilian relies purely on ambush, however. Some species have developed more specialized approaches suited to particular prey or environments. The gharial, with its narrow, elongated snout, sweeps its head rapidly sideways through water to snatch fast-moving fish, a technique that would be far less effective with the broader, more powerful snout other crocodilians use for tackling larger, more varied prey. Certain crocodile species have also been observed using tools in a genuinely surprising way, balancing small sticks and branches across their snouts near nesting bird colonies during the breeding season, apparently exploiting birds' natural instinct to gather nesting material, luring unsuspecting birds within striking range. This behavior, documented by researchers studying wild crocodile populations, suggests a level of behavioral flexibility considerably more sophisticated than the simple, instinct-driven ambush hunter crocodilians are often assumed to be. Group hunting has occasionally been documented too, particularly among Nile crocodiles gathering at seasonal river crossings, where large numbers of migrating wildebeest or zebra must cross dangerous stretches of water, creating opportunities for multiple crocodiles to hunt simultaneously within the same concentrated burst of activity. These seasonal crossings represent some of the most dramatic scenes captured in wildlife documentaries, dozens of crocodiles converging on a single crossing point, patient for months beforehand, ready the instant the annual migration finally brings prey directly to them rather than requiring any pursuit at all. Let us pause here for a moment, resting quietly away from facts and technique, and simply picture a calm scene instead. A wide African river during the dry season, water levels low, muddy banks exposed and cracked beneath the heat. Along one stretch, several crocodiles lie motionless in the afternoon sun, jaws slightly open, a behavior called gaping that helps regulate their body temperature during the hottest part of the day. Nothing here moves with any urgency. The whole scene holds itself in that particular, patient stillness this family has carried forward across an almost unimaginable stretch of evolutionary time, unbothered by heat, unbothered by time passing slowly around them. A heron wades carefully along the shallows nearby, entirely unconcerned by the motionless shapes resting just a short distance away, an odd, quiet truce settling naturally over the whole scene during these still, sun-drenched hours of the day. We will continue shortly, turning next toward crocodilian family life, an area that turns out to be considerably more attentive and involved than most people would expect from an animal so often associated with cold, distant instinct. Crocodilian parenting stands out as genuinely surprising among reptiles broadly, since most reptile species show little to no parental care once eggs are laid. Female crocodilians, by contrast, guard their nests fiercely throughout the incubation period, often for 2 to 3 months, defending the site aggressively against potential predators drawn to the buried eggs. Remarkably, crocodilian sex determination depends heavily on nest temperature rather than genetics alone, a system called temperature-dependent sex determination. Slightly warmer nests tend to produce more males in most species, while cooler temperatures favor females, meaning the specific location a mother chooses for her nest, sun-exposed or shaded, mound-built or dug into the ground, can meaningfully influence the eventual sex ratio of her entire clutch. Once hatching begins, young crocodilians call out from inside their eggs, a sound the mother recognizes clearly, prompting her to carefully excavate the nest and gently carry newly hatched young to the water in her mouth, an act requiring remarkable precision from an animal capable of exerting one of the strongest bite forces in the entire animal kingdom, delivered here with startling gentleness instead. Some species, particularly the American alligator, go a step further, gathering an entire clutch of hatchlings together and continuing to respond to their distress calls for weeks afterward, gathering scattered young back together whenever they wander too far or signal alarm, a level of ongoing attentiveness rarely associated with reptiles more broadly. Parental protection typically continues well beyond hatching, with many crocodilian mothers remaining close to their young for several weeks or even months, providing at least some defense against the numerous predators eager to prey on vulnerable hatchlings, including large fish, birds, and occasionally other crocodilians entirely unrelated to the brood in question. Despite this protective effort, survival rates among young crocodilians remain low, with only a small percentage typically surviving to adulthood across most species. This harsh reality reflects a broader reproductive strategy common among many reptiles, producing a relatively large number of offspring, accepting that most will not survive, rather than investing heavily in the survival of just 1 or 2 young at a time. Young crocodilians that do survive their vulnerable early years grow relatively slowly compared to many other animals, often taking a decade or more to reach full sexual maturity, and considerably longer still to reach the largest sizes their particular species is capable of achieving, some individuals continuing to grow gradually throughout nearly their entire, often quite long, lifespan. This slow, steady growth pattern mirrors the broader theme running throughout this whole story, an animal built around patience rather than speed, whether that patience shows up in a decades-long approach to reaching full size, or in the motionless hours spent waiting for exactly the right moment to strike. Crocodilian lifespan itself represents another quietly remarkable trait within this family, with many species living well past 50 years in the wild, and some documented individuals in captivity reaching 70 years or more. This considerable longevity, combined with their low, steady metabolic rate, means a single crocodilian may witness an enormous span of environmental change across its own individual lifetime, adapting behaviorally to shifting conditions in ways a shorter-lived animal simply would not have the opportunity to experience. Researchers studying crocodilian aging have found relatively few clear signs of the physical decline typically associated with old age in many other animals, a phenomenon sometimes loosely described as negligible senescence, where an aging individual shows surprisingly little measurable deterioration in physical capability compared to younger adults of the same species. This remarkable durability, both across individual lifetimes and across the deep span of evolutionary history covered earlier in this story, reinforces a theme that has run consistently throughout this entire exploration: an animal built less around rapid change and more around steady, patient endurance across whatever span of time it happens to be given. It is a genuinely rare combination to find anywhere in nature: an animal that ages slowly, grows steadily throughout much of its life, and can potentially witness generations of other species rise, adapt, and disappear entirely across the span of its own single, remarkably long existence. Modern crocodilians face genuine conservation challenges despite their remarkable evolutionary resilience, primarily driven by habitat loss as wetlands are drained for agriculture and development, along with historical overhunting for their valuable skin across much of the 20th century. Several species remain critically endangered today, including the Chinese alligator mentioned earlier, along with the Philippine crocodile and the gharial, both facing severe population pressure within their considerably reduced natural ranges. Conservation efforts have taken various forms across different regions, from captive breeding and reintroduction programs, to legal protection and hunting restrictions, to community-based initiatives that provide local economic incentive for protecting rather than eliminating crocodilian populations living near human settlements. Ecotourism centered around responsible crocodile viewing has emerged as one particularly effective strategy in several regions, transforming what was once viewed purely as a dangerous nuisance animal into a valued economic resource worth actively protecting. Human-crocodile conflict remains a genuine ongoing challenge in many regions, particularly where dense human populations live alongside larger, potentially dangerous species, requiring careful, often difficult balancing between legitimate safety concerns and the ecological importance of maintaining healthy crocodilian populations within their native wetland ecosystems. International trade regulations have also played a meaningful role in stabilizing several species, with strict rules now governing the legal skin trade that once drove so many populations toward collapse, encouraging regulated, sustainable farming operations over unchecked hunting of dwindling wild populations. Bringing together everything explored across this section, a fuller picture of the modern crocodilian world comes into view. 26 species scattered from Australian estuaries to African rivers to American wetlands, each shaped by its own particular habitat and history. Hunting strategies built around patient ambush, occasionally supplemented by surprising tool use or coordinated group behavior. Parenting far more attentive than most people expect from a reptile, guided partly by nest temperature itself. Remarkable longevity paired with slow, steady aging. And genuine, ongoing conservation challenges facing several species even now, balanced against real, hard-won successes elsewhere within the same family. None of this diminishes the deeper evolutionary story covered earlier. If anything, it reinforces it: an animal built around patience, flexibility, and endurance, still carrying those same fundamental traits forward into every corner of its modern life, from how it hunts to how it raises its young to how long it manages to live. There remains a little more of this remarkable story left to explore, including a final, broader reflection on what 200 million years of continuous survival actually says about resilience, adaptability, and the quiet power of simply enduring, long after so much else around this ancient family has come and gone. Beyond the specific species, hunting styles, and family life covered so far, crocodilians hold their own particular place within human culture too, stretching back thousands of years across numerous civilizations. In ancient Egypt, the crocodile god Sobek was worshipped in several regions along the Nile, associated with fertility, military strength, and the river's own life-giving power, with entire temples built specifically to honor and, in some cases, house living sacred crocodiles. Mummified crocodiles have been discovered in considerable numbers at certain ancient Egyptian sites, some wrapped with the same careful ritual attention given to human burials, others found in mass numbers suggesting a dedicated breeding and mummification practice tied directly to religious worship, an unusually elaborate cultural relationship for what many other societies simply viewed as a dangerous river predator to be avoided. Elsewhere across the world, crocodiles and alligators appear throughout indigenous folklore in Australia, the Americas, and Southeast Asia, often cast as powerful, ambiguous figures, neither purely villainous nor purely heroic, but respected as forces of nature deserving genuine caution and, in many traditions, a considerable amount of ritual respect. In parts of West Africa, certain crocodile populations living within sacred ponds have been protected for generations by local communities, tied closely into spiritual belief and considered guardians rather than threats, allowed to grow remarkably tame around visitors precisely because they have never known persecution or fear from the humans living alongside them. Modern science has continued uncovering genuinely surprising details about crocodilian biology well beyond what earlier generations of researchers ever suspected. One particularly striking discovery involves their remarkably sophisticated cardiovascular system, considerably more complex than what is typically found among reptiles more broadly, including a specialized valve allowing crocodilians to redirect blood flow depending on whether they are actively diving or resting at the surface. This adaptation helps explain part of how crocodilians manage extended dives, sometimes remaining submerged for well over an hour under the right conditions, redirecting blood away from less essential organs and toward the brain and heart during these extended underwater stretches, a physiological trick that took researchers considerable effort to fully map and understand. Recent studies have also revealed crocodilians possess surprisingly acute color vision, along with specialized pressure receptors scattered across their jaw, sometimes called dome pressure receptors, capable of detecting the tiniest ripples or vibrations moving through water, giving them an additional, finely tuned sense layered on top of sight, smell, and hearing, useful even in complete darkness or murky, sediment-filled water where visibility drops to nearly nothing. These pressure receptors are sensitive enough to detect a single droplet of water landing on the surface some distance away, an extraordinary level of precision that helps explain how crocodilians can strike accurately even when hunting in pitch darkness or heavily clouded water where sight alone would offer almost no useful information at all. Vocal communication among crocodilians has also proven considerably more complex than earlier researchers initially assumed. Hatchlings produce distinct distress calls capable of summoning parental attention quickly, while adult crocodilians across several species engage in deep, resonant bellowing during breeding season, sometimes accompanied by a striking behavior called the water dance, where vibrations from the bellow cause water directly above the animal's back to leap and dance visibly on the surface. This bellowing serves multiple purposes simultaneously: advertising territory, attracting potential mates, and establishing size and dominance among competing males within a particular stretch of river or wetland. Researchers studying these calls have found they can carry remarkably far across water, sometimes audible from well over a mile away under the right calm conditions. Some species also produce distinctive hisses, growls, and even a sound resembling a cough, each apparently carrying slightly different social meaning depending on context, a whole vocal repertoire considerably richer than the largely silent, purely instinctive image many people carry of crocodilians more generally. Hatchlings from the very same clutch have even been recorded synchronizing their calls together shortly before hatching, apparently coordinating the timing of their emergence, a small but genuinely remarkable example of communication occurring before an animal has even fully entered the world outside its egg. Let us rest here for a short while, drifting away from the deeper science and simply picturing a calm evening scene instead. A quiet river at dusk, the last warm light of day fading slowly behind distant trees. Somewhere along the bank, a low bellow rises briefly across the still water, deep and resonant, before fading back into silence, the surface rippling gently in its wake before settling smooth once more. Nothing here feels urgent or threatening. It is simply the quiet, ordinary rhythm of an ancient family going about its evening exactly as it always has, largely unheard by anyone beyond the immediate stretch of water where the sound briefly carried. Somewhere further downstream, a second, fainter call answers back, distant and low, the two sounds briefly overlapping across the still evening air before both fade away entirely, leaving only the quiet trickle of water moving gently past the reeds. We will continue shortly, turning toward a broader reflection on this entire remarkable story, and what 200 million years of continuous survival ultimately says about resilience and endurance. Stepping back across this entire story now, from strange, upright-running Triassic ancestors, through enormous river giants sharing space with dinosaurs, through one of the most severe extinction events the planet has ever experienced, and finally into the diverse, resilient family of modern species still thriving today, a clear and consistent thread runs through every single chapter. Patience. Flexibility. A willingness to occupy quiet, less contested spaces rather than competing directly for the most visible, dominant ecological roles. This strategy rarely produces the flashiest results in any single moment. Crocodilians were never the largest, fastest, or most dominant predators during most of their long history. Dinosaurs and later mammals frequently claimed those particular titles instead. But across the full span of 200 million years, patient adaptability has proven itself considerably more durable than raw dominance ever could, outlasting nearly every rival that once seemed far more impressive by comparison. There is a genuinely valuable lesson tucked quietly inside this long evolutionary story, one that extends well beyond biology alone. Survival, over the truly long term, often favors adaptability and endurance over sheer, momentary power. This is not to say strength or dominance never matter, clearly they often do, but 200 million years of crocodilian history suggests that a strategy built around flexibility and patience can, given enough time, prove itself considerably more durable than raw power alone ever could manage on its own. It is worth sitting with just how much has changed around crocodilians throughout their existence, while their own core design has remained remarkably consistent. Continents have drifted apart and collided again. Ice ages have come and gone repeatedly. Entire ecosystems have risen, flourished, and vanished completely, replaced by others built around entirely different sets of dominant species. Through every single one of these enormous changes, crocodilians simply kept doing, with only gradual refinement, what their earliest ancestors had already figured out worked well enough tens of millions of years earlier. There is something genuinely humbling in that consistency, a reminder that the natural world does not always reward constant reinvention. Sometimes, getting the fundamentals right early, and refining patiently rather than reinventing entirely, turns out to be the far more durable strategy across truly deep spans of time. Modern crocodilians, floating quietly in rivers and swamps around the world today, are living proof of that principle, carrying forward, almost unchanged in its essential form, a body plan first tested and proven successful long before most other animal lineages alive today had even begun to take shape. Few living things anywhere on the planet offer such a direct, tangible connection to a world this ancient, a genuine, living link stretching back across nearly the entire history of complex animal life on Earth, still resting quietly along riverbanks much as it always has. There is also something worth appreciating about how crocodilians manage to hold two seemingly contradictory qualities together so completely. They are, without question, among the most formidable predators alive today, capable of a bite force and explosive strike unmatched by nearly anything else in the natural world. And yet, simultaneously, they are capable of remarkable patience, stillness, and even surprising gentleness, particularly toward their own young. This combination, ferocity and tenderness existing side by side within the very same animal, offers a useful reminder against oversimplifying any creature into a single, flat characteristic. A crocodile is neither purely a mindless killing machine nor a misunderstood gentle giant. It is something considerably more complete than either label alone could capture, shaped by 200 million years of careful, patient refinement across an enormous range of circumstances and challenges. Understanding this fuller picture, rather than settling for the simpler, more dramatic caricature often presented in popular media, offers a considerably richer appreciation of exactly what this ancient family actually represents within the broader story of life on Earth. It also invites a small measure of humility from us, the observers, reminding us that even creatures we think we already understand completely often carry considerably more depth and nuance than a single glance, or a single dramatic headline, could ever fully capture. As this documentary slowly approaches its close, it feels worth returning one final time to that very first image explored at the beginning of this story, a low shape drifting silently through warm, ancient water roughly 200 million years ago. Everything covered since then, the strange land-running ancestors, the enormous dinosaur-era giants, the catastrophic extinction survived almost by accident, the diverse modern species scattered across the globe today, all traces back to that same simple, patient strategy first established so incredibly long ago. Few animal lineages alive today can claim a story stretching back quite this far, remaining recognizably similar in form and function across such an enormous, almost unimaginable span of time. Sharks offer one of the only comparable examples, another ancient design proven durable enough to require only minor refinement across hundreds of millions of years. It is a genuinely remarkable thing to consider, that the low, quiet shape resting motionless in a river somewhere tonight is carrying forward a story considerably older than most mountains currently standing anywhere on the planet's surface. Mountains rise and eventually erode back down to nothing across tens of millions of years. Rivers shift course entirely, sometimes vanishing altogether. And yet this particular lineage, largely unchanged in its essential design, has simply continued on, quietly outlasting geological features most of us would assume to be permanent and unshakable. Picture, one final time, a wide river at nightfall, the last light fading gently behind a distant tree line, the water settling into calm, unbroken stillness. Somewhere along the muddy bank, a crocodile rests motionless, patient, exactly as its ancestors have rested for 200 million years before it, largely unchanged, remarkably successful, quietly enduring long after so much else around it has come, changed dramatically, and eventually disappeared entirely. This scene, or some close variation of it, continues playing out tonight across countless rivers, swamps, and coastlines scattered around the world, an ancient, patient story still unfolding exactly as it always has, entirely indifferent to whether anyone happens to be watching or aware of just how remarkable this quiet persistence actually is. There is something deeply calming in that thought, knowing this particular story continues on regardless, night after night, century after century, a steady, patient rhythm woven quietly into the deep history of this planet. The stars above shift only slightly across the sky, the river continues its slow, unhurried flow toward the sea, and somewhere below, resting exactly as its ancestors have for 200 million years, that same patient shape simply waits, entirely unbothered by however much time continues quietly passing around it. And so, gently, we arrive at the end of this long journey through 200 million years of crocodilian history. We began with a single, low shape drifting through ancient water, and we have spent all this time since slowly tracing exactly how that simple, patient design managed to survive nearly everything the planet has thrown at it: strange upright ancestors, enormous dinosaur-era giants, a catastrophic extinction event, and an entire modern world reshaped considerably by human presence. We traveled from bizarre, land-running relatives to fully marine giants, through the quiet survival strategy that outlasted the dinosaurs entirely, into the diverse family of modern species still thriving today, each one carrying forward the same fundamental blueprint first tested and proven across an almost unimaginable stretch of evolutionary time. Nature, once again, offers a quiet, patient reminder that endurance often matters more than dominance, that getting the fundamentals right can outlast even the most impressive rivals, given enough time. Somewhere out there tonight, in a river much like the one we have imagined together throughout this story, a crocodile rests quietly, carrying within it 200 million years of patient, uninterrupted history. Thank you for spending this time exploring one of the most remarkable survival stories nature has ever produced. If this journey through 200 million years of crocodilian history helped you relax and unwind, consider liking the video, subscribing for more slow, thoughtful stories like this one, and sharing your own thoughts down in the comments below. Sleep peacefully, and good night.